Oh, I'm not recording this.
And-
No, for me. Nope. We don't want to. This is gonna set it for a period out. Then we can start. You can start. I'm starting to be off. So you don't. have to-
Okay, we're good. Let's roll. We'll get the meeting started here, and we'll start with roll call. Matt Schuler is here. Kathy Hinkton,
Here.
Melanie Parma.
Here.
All right, so we have a meeting. We have one. So I would take a motion to approve the agenda for today.
So move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, Jen, we are clicking here, aren't we?
Yep.
Okay, we've got one item on the agenda today for regular business, which is consideration of possible action on the proposed community-based learning center at 158 North Maple Avenue. And Will, are you gonna kick us off on this, or is Cheryl?
I am. I'm going to kick us off, and then eventually we'll open it up for others to join in and partake. So, if you recall, at our February 2nd meeting, 2022, the RDA voted to approve staff proceed on a partnership project with UWGB-based companies to rehab 158 North Maple Avenue into the community-based learning center. This purpose of this center was to house 5 and 6 students. Plus the Center for Civic Engagement AmeriCorps Vista Fellow, who will work with and help coordinate many of the activities. In exchange for reduced rents, the students will commit to a year-long community-based learning project with local organizations, nonprofits, the city, neighborhood association, where they'll gain valuable practical experience to foster community developments and strengthen connection between the UWGB and the city. Since our conversations, Paul and Josh from base companies, David, Corey, and the administration at the university have had meetings. We've had meetings to work out what the structure of this organization would look like, what this partnership would look like. Paul and Josh have been working back and forth with the university, developing, just understanding how rent transactions would look for the students and overall management. And then, a considerable amount of time has also been just looking at, how are we going to get this project to the finish line as far as the rehab goes? Because I think that's all, we can't really skirt or dance around the fact that this is a huge project. We're talking, if you look at the pictures in your folder, and some of you were able to attend a tour of this building, we're talking over 3,000 square feet. A turn of the century, beautiful monumental building, on the corner of our near west side downtown. And though the saying goes, these old houses have strong bones, and this one is no exception to that, it doesn't change the fact that it's going to take some investment to rehab and to give it a new life. So we've been talking back and forth, and that's part of the reason why I just wanted to provide some context here. We've developed some closed session language on here just to understand. We want to get into a little more detail that we can't necessarily get into openly, just out of respect for all the partners involved when talking about funding for this project and what that could look like. But really, after talking about what this project could look like, the benefit it will have on the neighboring community as a whole, all the partners involved are still really have good faith in this project and willing to move this forward. And one of the next steps here to help with part of this project is going to require some philanthropy, some fundraising to engage some initial partners in here, and really in order to do that and to ascertain what the true rehab costs are, because we've thrown numbers around. We've seen proposals in the past for this property with for a single family home. This is a little bit different, and the market has changed. I'd like to say it changed for the better, but it's gone the opposite way, especially with the supply chain since. We've had those proposals in and those numbers have changed. So, it's hard to really understand, what kind of financing and funding this is gonna take without getting a closer number of what the true rehab costs are. In order to do that, the next step in this project would be to, enlist the services of an architect to come up with renderings of what the layout is gonna look like in the building, but then also put together plans that, contractors can formulate accurate estimates to what the true rehab costs are. So we understood that before we can really enter into, enlisting the services, whether that's, the city managing an architect or one of our partners here, university or base companies managing those services or paying for them, we really need to bring this in front of members of the RDA here just for a status update and have a really full conversation of what it's going to take to get this project to the finish line. Before I go any further, I just want to kind of stop and make sure I'm not leaving anything out as far as context goes. So no, Cheryl, I technically have to open up the floor for David or Paul, but I just want to make
We
sure.
officially have to open the floor if we let them speak.
Yeah.
It's really, we've been struggling with this project. It's so expensive. That's really the bottom line. It works on concept in every which way, right? But the costs are going to be so much in this project. Originally, I think Ken didn't know before it was going to about $1 million, like 2 years ago. The thinking those costs might be a little higher now. Just with the way interest rates are and some other things. And so we're starting to get into this specialized house project. That's going to be a whole lot of money. And I say, you know what? The last thing I want to do is bring it to the RDA. And the RDA is like, have you lost your minds? Right? Because we need to have that.
Sure, that happened a long time.
We want that input, I guess, from the committee on how comfortable you would be with this type of a project going forward. Because our next step is to spend money, right? Is to hire, to get some plans done, to actually, if we're gonna solicit or to figure out those costs, we're gonna have to start spending some money on it. I think there were some thought that the university might be able to help us do some fundraising, but I think that there's been a little bit of a change there and that their focus is more on the students really. And making sure that the rent is covered for the students on that end. So that kind of throws that back on our end. We do have some funding that we can contribute, but we will not want to fund the whole with $10. We have a partner who's willing to carry the property, so it's on the tax roll. That was an issue with the RDA. With that, we didn't know it. We get it back on the tax roll minimally, right? So we have a partner who's willing to take that on and manage the property, right, and carry a mortgage, but he's not gonna take care of mortgage with money, and right, we're upside down on that. So I think that's why we wanted to bring it to the subcommittee to talk to you about that and because our options really now are to continue on the path we have for this great project, which we love, right? Or we go for an RFP for standard single or two, probably not successfully over tear down.
And is the concept as it's viewed right now, so neither the city nor the RDA is the owner.
The RDA owns the property. Well, in the concept we want to do with the university,
Going
correct, that base companies would own the property.
Okay. Okay, so base companies would own the property. It provides some cash flow in the long run through rent.
Correct.
Right. And there'd be how many students living in it is the concept?
We six students plus an AmeriCorps Vista member that's with the Civic Scholars Program that would be almost acting like this, like the RA or the supervisor living on site.
The dead mother.
The dead mother.
The mother or father. And the university, their role is to provide that rent, make sure that rent. So
Okay.
it would really be, right, the university is, I think, gonna make sure that the rent streams come in.
Okay. And then our partners, as well at base companies, Paul, and they've expressed that, they believe in this program that the university is providing, and so they're not looking to make crazy profits on this. It's they're even considering, how can we invest, any potential revenues back into the program.
Yep. And so is it a little bit conceptual, like, hey, we know there's gonna be a renovation cost in this, let's just say it's 500,000, that's a big number. And hey, the property probably doesn't justify as a student rental based on what it can bring in on just that. And so then we need some philanthropy to offset part of that number so that then the rental stream can make it work. Is that a fair way just to create a really simple mental model?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And whose responsibility is it from the philanthropy side? Because that's, I mean, is that the city? Is that university? Is that, I mean?
That's a great,
who's-
that's a great question. And that, I believe that specific role has yet to be defined completely. And we started talking with a little bit, we know that, you know, unfortunately, right now, with current workloads of staff, we don't have staff capacity to dedicate, you know, opening up a fundraising campaign, you know, for this. So I think needs to be some serious conversation, you know, if a major part of the funding for this involves philanthropy, you know, what the path to that looks like. You know, as far as grant writing and donor engagement for a project like that. I mean, I still have this hope, you know, in that, you know, perhaps maybe you know, the university would have a change of heart at some points, you know, considering that, you know, the city is willing to, you know, contribute some funds to the rehab. We have base companies willing to contribute that, you know, maybe they could find a way to kick in something. But I also I do understand, you know, the limitations that, you know, a huge institution such as the university system has when it comes, especially when it comes to giving. You know, because as David was elaborating on, it's really challenging for the university to acquire property and own property, but then also when it comes to philanthropy, there's a certain system and process that all has to flow through in the system. So it's not as easy as just setting up this one-off fundraising activity that the university can manage and contribute to. So to answer your question, the philanthropy, that's what I think has us still, I don't want to say nervous, but just it's not yet defined. So when it's not defined, there's just a cause for, you know, uneasiness with that.
It's a risk.
It's a risk. It is a risk, you know, and I am, you know, not going to be blind to the risks that do exist with this, but at the same time, you know, I still feel, as do our partners here, that, you know, the benefit still, you know, outweighs some of those risks long term. When we're talking about a long-term partner with as a university having a presence downtown, and not just having a sign downtown that says university, but like students living right downtown in our urban core. You know, I was just at the university.
Well, not just living.
In
Volunteering.
volunteering and
Working.
contributing, absolutely. I was just at the career and internship fair at UWGB this last week, and I haven't been in the university in a while, but boy, it was just a fresh of breath air to just be surrounded by all of these young minds, you know, this energy that I just would love to see more of in our downtown and urban core, which I think, you know, a lot of us can agree that's lacking.
Are you saying there's something wrong with the old minds that you're surrounded by?
No, I just feel that needs to be a compliment, right? I feel like.
There's no, you know, your world.
I mean, I got to think, I'm 34, I like to think still somewhat young.
And so, the decision that we need to drive today is kind of what?
If we want to go forward with minimal of getting some numbers or getting some work done on engineering and architectural,
Got it.
figure out what those costs.
To be able to really understand what is that
Right.
$500,000 number or $1 million number
Right,
or
Right.
or
And then,
170.
and then you also have plans and you have renderings that then can support a fundraising or
Right.
philanthropy.
Exactly, because that's
Right?
kind of where I was,
You can
that's why I
talk a-
asked.
You
if
can talk a
knew.
lot about it, and you can show people these pictures, that's probably not gonna drive, right?
You gotta see the vision.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, to be
Exactly.
able to share that.
I think her opinion is biased. The architect.
You know, it is a beautiful old property down there.
Right.
With a lot of history. And I really would hate to see it torn down. But we really do need to understand the cost of what it's gonna take to fix it up. So I make a motion that we approve the,
Well, I think. Oh, you can make a motion.
Go ahead.
It's fine, it's fine.
I'm sorry,
No, that's okay. So, so this is what we're looking at here, right, from a proposal perspective. And I think, so my 2 cents, I think like, right, I mean, it's not a huge commitment. It's a commitment, right? And it's the dollars we're talking about. Not a huge commitment overall from a total, but I would be curious to see if we even needed to take it to fully through construction documents to get us to a position where we would have a good, could we get through, DD is and be able to get some pretty realistic numbers on what that work would,
And
What
to be
happened?
fair,
yeah.
we have base
I
companies.
Yeah.
I was just
Yep.
gonna say, so let's, yeah,
Who have a
so,
lot of knowledge about
so,
things,
so I'll make a motion to open the floor.
I'll second that.
All right.
All
So,
those in favor say aye.
I,
Okay.
so yeah, I guess if you wanna share, whether it's, base companies or UWGB wants to speak up, but then I do wanna talk about this specific.
Maybe we'll open up to Josh and Polly, because they really were, I mean, they brought ISG
Mhm.
to the table. They have a strong working relationship with that organization, and and really they offered to, because they understand some of the hangups that can happen and the barriers when working with large institutions like the university and the city of Green Bay. You understand how those can exist, and even have offered their services to help manage the architect. So, but I'll turn it over to both you two to share a little bit more.
David, can you hear us okay? Is that-
I can, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's little pieces to what everybody said, so I'm trying to catch up with it, but Melanie, you were spot on at the end. It's like, it's time for the rightful owner, currently is the RDA.
Yeah.
They need to understand, this is it kind of reminded me of the rail yard as you guys were talking, but you could tear them down and start over.
Right.
And you're gonna be money ahead. There's no doubt about
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
If not for something that nets out your cost basis to something that can compete. I'll get into the numbers piece, and David and I did have another talk that you weren't, it was after our last call last week or something like that. We were doing some reverse math, but
Okay.
we think too that that's the next piece, is that inspirational component to say, why wouldn't you want to get behind
Right,
this? We want the nuts and bolts part of it,
right,
so that we understand, we know it's gonna be expensive on a per square foot basis, and anybody, it's a terrible property. But so were the rail yard buildings, you had the
Yeah,
books falling
right,
in every one of
yeah,
those things,
yeah.
and they turn out awesome.
yeah,
And so, going back to the numbers, and then one of the other pieces, and you were right there with the kind of the structure of this deal. We were kind of doing philanthropy at first. The university, it's not like the university isn't behind this. They're not behind this currently for bricks and mortar.
right,
Where we were at is to say, hey, what's a house like this worth in this neighborhood? $250,000, $300,000. There's been some nice momentum there, but there's some challenges around it as well. And we work with Ken and Brian, and it's like, hey, it's a continuation of the progress. But we don't want to be $750,000 into a single family residence if this thing blows up on us. So the university has now, David will finish his thought, but they're coming in with fundraising and philanthropy to the student, not the bricks and mortar. So we then, Christopher Paquette is their attorney, Dave DeWick has got our side. So we're already working on deal structure to say, hey, still, how do you get into this thing? Somebody's signing on the dotted line for the $750,000 development budget, and know that your revenue stream is solid through the university. So what we're doing now is we're kind of revamping our numbers to say how, and this is what you weren't on, late last week, I think, but to say, hey, if we can up what we're trying to do at first is get the cost basis way down, and the students wouldn't have to pay hardly anything, and the university bursar's office could do what they wanted to do with that delta. Because we've worked with the student housing already, and they told us that they have to have and the sizes and that kind of stuff. Well, now it's going to be more like, I'd say closer to market rate for a student, which raises the NOI coming into the project, which will allow us to go borrow more than the 250 or 300 if we get the documentation right, which we will, we're already working on that. So it's kind of a different way. So I just didn't want anybody to think that the university isn't behind this from philanthropy perspective. And then I think the other thing we decided on our last call was, we want to be careful what type of funds we bring into this, such that it doesn't handicap the university's ability to do the underwriting of the need component for certain funds that I think have strings attached to them. And I think we've come a long ways
We have.
with that, but it's time for the pretty
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
And I think we've taken all of our time out of it, as far as, I don't think there's any dollars in there for
No.
base companies, so that's just a flow through. And if nothing goes forward,
Yeah,
at least the RDA has more credible information that they can put with their asset.
Yeah.
But we think it's gonna help with all the other moving pieces that helps.
so what I would typically see with a proposal like this, in a situation that we're in, is I would say we would look to approve moving forward with the schematic design, which is, $7,750. At that point, then you can read what we get, right? We get conceptual plans. I think we get some exterior elevations. I think I don't know if that included renderings, right? Like we could maybe bump up even like ask for some additional services in schematic design, then gets us to a basis of design, which would then get you an opportunity, to share a vision, but then do some, a little bit more detailed pricing, I would think, with a schematic floor plan, some elevations, basis of design, right? You carry a decent contingency in that number until then we have an idea of what that cost is, and then what's the next step and how do we move forward from that? And then and that's why they've broken it out this way, right? Then they say like, okay, at that point, if it's still looking favorable, then we say, okay, ISG, now we're ready, move into the next phases. And then with each of those phases, then base companies has the opportunity to get more detailed information from ISG. They update their budget, it keeps getting closer to real, but at least that gives us a good magnitude of scale going through that schematic design phase first.
And that'll give us some high level numbers.
Yeah, yep. Would you agree? I mean, is that?
I'll defer
that-
to Josh.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what proposal you're looking at. I
Yeah,
haven't seen
oh,
it yet.
yeah,
I don't
so,
think-
so it says,
Same ISG. proposal.
yeah, so
Same one.
ISG, yeah, so says initially ISG will work with the owner, identified stakeholders to prepare preliminary site concept plan to address site access, parking. ISG will prepare schematic floor plans for the interior of the proposed facility and exterior elevations to illustrate the proposed building material selections. Deliverables of this scope would include a written basis of design, schematic plans, elevations to assist the city with procuring a probable cost estimate. So opinion of probable cost would be, a little high level at that phase because you don't have the nitty gritty, but your basis of design would give, they would have their engineers write out, here's what we're looking at for mechanical systems, right? We gotta gut all of this and provide whatever furnaces, air conditioning, new electrical service, whatnot, right? So it wouldn't be design, but it would just literally be like bullet points of a basis of design. And then I think maybe the only thing is, do we need to, I don't know exactly, what their level of exterior elevation, but right, we want it to be something that we can visually, a nice rendering so that, so maybe if we need something a little more at that point, maybe our, maybe that compensation piece needs to go up a little on their end to just be able to give
But
that.
you're the one issuing that contract now, right? Well, is that the way that's?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
would have that
could be, we
with them.
consult with legal department as far as if the city is already is paying for architectural services, that we would need to be the ones managing or overseeing the architects work. Unless if that, we needed to be, that was deferred by the RDA, the city to someone else.
Will, could I jump in here real quick?
Yes,
I just wanted to echo what Paul was saying. And first of all, to thank Paul and Base Companies and also the city for the vision and believing in this project. And I just wanted to reiterate what Paul was saying, that the university is still behind it. I've had some conversations with the chancellor in our advancement office. And as Will was saying, we're a state university, and everything has to go through the DOA, it has to go through UW system, it has to go through the state. And it's complicated, and owning property is not something that that non-academic property that the university can do for a number of legal reasons. So while we initially did think that the university was going to be able to do some fundraising, our chancellor, after consulting with Tony Warner and Advancement, said that, what they're really good at doing is raising money for scholarships. So what we've re-envisioned talking with Paul and then also with Will is, and Tony Warner's told me he already has a donor who's committed to this, even though we don't even have the plans for it, is if they'll give money for scholarships, that will reduce the rate that the students will have to pay. And as the more money they can raise for these scholarships, the less students will have to pay. And that allows us, as Paul was saying, and we were originally looking at a reduced rate, but now we could charge the market rate with the understanding that all of the students who commit to this will get a scholarship, which will go specifically towards the rent that they're paying. All of this will be collected through the university. Students will it will be semi-student housing, so that it will be put on their tuition bill. The bursar collects that, and then we can just issue a check out to base companies. So we've worked out a mechanism for this. I'm also hopeful and pretty confident that once we have the architectural plans and a vision for what this will look like, that there might be people who are saying, well, and maybe they would give money towards the overall project as a whole once they can see it, because the goal that we have with our Center for Civic Engagement, a sophomore project, what we call Civic Scholars, is to familiarize our students with the city, with the types of things going on, with the hope that they'll stay in Green Bay after they graduate. And I hope that that's something that businesses and the city and community organizations will look favorably upon. We have 13 students this year in our Civic Scholars program. They're all sophomores. Only 2 are from the city of Green Bay. We just took them on a tour with Jeff Merkus of downtown Green Bay, went to the Meijer, went to the Boardwalk, the Hotel Northland, all of these things that they had no idea about and are really excited about the things going on in the city. They'll have this internship, they'll do this community development, working in planning, working for nonprofits, working for the city. They could even be business students doing something business, public-private partnership type of a thing, with the hopes then that when they graduate, they'll have connections in the city, they'll know what's going on, they'll look for a job here, and they'll want to stay in the city. So that's the big picture type of a thing. And again, I want to thank Paul and Base and the city for believing in that as a way of helping connect our students to the city, getting them familiarized and having this housing downtown. If the public market goes through, which I'm super excited about, they're going to be right behind that. They're going to be the urban hub. The university now has its sign on that building that will be a workspace where we can bring our faculty down there. We can bring business leaders in to meet at that space that the university is committed to. Students don't have to worry about this transportation issue of getting down there, and they'll be right in the heart of it to be able to develop and work on these types of projects. So that's the big picture. There's a lot of moving parts. There's the financing issue and everything, but if it can all come into place, and I think we have a really good partnership between the 3 of these organizations, to me, it's a unique idea. We have a committee of people working in community engagement all across the UW system. They're really excited about this and want to try and implement something in their city, Stevens Point, Parkside, et cetera, about this as a way of being sort of a model of helping to bring closer ties between the university and the city. So that's my spiel, and that the vision that we have from the university, they're behind it. We've got students, we're growing. We're up to almost 10,000 students here, not on campus, but that opportunity, I think, is really exciting for our community.
Thanks, David.
Great.
Yeah, it's an attraction and retention effort, but
Yeah.
it's also a peace of mind and confidence for the community. The more times they see our university in the urban core. And I'm glad he brought up the sign that just went up by the urban hub there, because we get 80,000 people coming in for the games. They see that higher ed has a place. They may not see where the campus is, but they see higher ed.
Sure.
And so just connecting with you, Melanie, it's like,
Yeah.
you see this first step here, the schematic design.
Yep.
Very logical step.
Yes.
That allows us then to proceed, hey, maybe we go bite off this next chunk after that, if it allows us to merchandise.
Yep.
So on and so forth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, so I would just say, when we do a motion, I would just include in that schematic design, like colored renderings or something, making sure that that was part of that, because I think that would be, and again, that might, I don't know if we need to maybe then, exactly, yeah, give you a max target or something of that sort, which I don't think be a whole lot more, but just makes sense to start with that phase. And so, and again, this is another step down the road, but as we were talking about all the partnerships and not necessarily to add additional partners, but think about like, right, that fundraising piece and getting the word out there. If we could get some of our nonprofits or our Greater Green Bay Community Foundation or something, right, to kind of drive the story, because I'm trying to think of like who does the story come from the best, right? Like I think the university piece, but then what's happening downtown, right? Right, exactly. So as right as you start trying to get people engaged with that vision, you know, who are those storytellers? I think it's going to be another piece.
I think Randy's gonna. I gotta get Randy. Tell him to
Just
start.
tell- yeah.
So, and then the other here, right, is so for the RDA, we're kind of at that, hey, one option on one end of the spectrum is that thing gets torn down, right? It's just, we could end up finding out at the end of the day, it's just too much money for anybody to underwrite, which is not.
Everybody might say that.
Right, and we say, okay, so we're gonna end up tearing this thing down, and then the RDA's got an empty lot. Build house there, so whatever. We're to the end of the spectrum that we can go all the way to what's here, and hey, we're gonna have to invest 8 to 10 grand in order to see this next step. To get us there, that's kind of the way I'm thinking about this.
Exactly. Otherwise, we're just kind of at it in.
We're stuck.
Right,
Yes.
Anything else, comments have while we've still got the floor open here?
Yeah.
I hate to close it up and then.
You would like to share or add or call a question or?
No, it's a complex project. It's not the biggest project, but there's a lot of pieces to
There
it.
is.
We have a neighbor works, I think here, one, you know, and trying to think of different community partners that we could involve, and it's nothing better.
I think
than
if it was
working with a
easy, it would've been done
municipality and
already.
state school system.
Yeah.
You know, I've worked with a lot of the nonprofits downtown, and we brought in community leaders, and we've had a lot of discussion, be it, you know, Brown County or, but something that always comes up is the presence of people from UWGB downtown and the vibrancy, you know, that can help bring. And so, you know, I'm just excited to see this move
This
forward,
isn't
and I
the
think,
highest and best use of our time. We're in this for economic development, right? It's exactly what you're saying.
and it's, people have said it for years and years and years and years. And so I do think there's people that can get behind it.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, under $500,000, that's not that much money. Right.
I'm gonna spend more time hanging out.
Well, no, I mean, when somebody comes and asks for 3.3 million, you know, the campaigns that I've been on have all been huge, so.
Thanks, David.
how many
Thank you, David.
guys-
I understand you two have to,
It's 6:06 right here.
it's, yeah, we could,
I'm good at reading.
Is that okay? Any other questions for us?
No, I think we're good.
I'd make a motion then that we close the floor and go back to regular order. of business.
Okay,
Second that.
thanks, Will.
We
Good
have a
job.
motion and a second. All those in favor say
Hi,
aye.
David.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
Thank
thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, Paul. Okay, do we have a motion? And actually, Melanie, I
I know.
probably let you.
Okay, I know, I
Right.
hijacked
Motion.
Kathy's motion before.
No, that is okay, because you brought up a lot of,
Great point.
you know, a lot of great points, and I had previously looked at that, but you're the expert.
Sure. So I'm just looking, so I make a motion to approve moving forward with ISG on schematic design as noted in their proposal. To include colored renderings as well in that schematic design. And should we and giving, staff authorization up to $10,000 to
Would
negotiate.
that cover it? do you
Yeah,
think?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And I would recommend that. Put in the motion.
Yeah.
Because the design they're asking for 11,200.
Actually, just 7,750 is where we would be at, just that first part of schematic. design is there. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Oh, did
somewhere.
you guys get
I
that
got it.
piece?
No,
Yeah,
no, I
So-
was looking at the.
yep, so even just that first piece there, yeah, so up to 10, and then get some, colored rendering in there.
Yeah, that'll be
Do we have a second?
pictured. Second, I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Right.
Excellent. We have a step. Man, it is good
Exciting
have
to
someone
see
who's
what
in an
this-
architectural firm sitting here for this one.
Right?
You made it sound like we knew what we were talking
There we
about.
go.
Absolutely.
That was
And
the
it's
only
gonna be
thing, right?
exciting to get.
Yes, to see that vision, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that then I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Third.
Please adjourn. Third.
Good
Thanks
very
for
much.
sticking with this one.
Thank you.
Yes, boys. Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you, David.
No, and I'd be willing to go in any meetings once we move this forward.
Where is the camera in here? I keep like waving.
Camera's
David,
here.
And it's like,
Yeah, right there in the corner.
And the micro.
It was weird to see ourselves,
The
wasn't it?
right, yeah.
Yeah, we're
Great. Well, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting me. I'm actually teaching a class. My students are working on something, so I got to run back, but I appreciate you